saving.
The time by Carrie Chris is 6 p.m. Time for CBX Business News. The Business News headlines is brought to you by CBX Wealth Management, making more possible.
Arrangements today with implications for private sector adoption. Also ahead, the Bahamas reports a 15% drop in major crimes for 2025, a development that could lower business risk. And later, the UN floats a US $3 billion AI fund as global power shifts and developing economies push to avoid being left behind. Stay with us as we unpack these stories and more right after the break.
Wealth is not simply counted in dollars or cents, but in the time we spend with love, in love, giving love. Wealth is not simply a means to an end. It is the means to live out loud. Wealth is more than money. It's about family, the memories you create, the legacy you leave behind, and your ability to enjoy life in the moment. It's also about seeing the QMAX possibilities and seizing investment opportunities to achieve the future you want and deserve. Which is why QMAX Wealth will focus on your investments so you can experience more. Because true wealth is truly more. To start investing today, call 876-926-7767.
The local news is brought to you by Darriman Trading, better from the start. Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean flavors and fragrances, tease the senses, and Pulse Investments.
Welcome back to CBX Business News. We begin with a structural change inside the public sector. Workers across Jamaica's public sector began staggered work hours today, February 2, marking a structural change in how government offices operate. The rollout marks the first phase of the government's National Flexible Work Arrangements Initiative, launched last week by Minister of Efficiency, Innovation and Digital Transformation, Ambassador Audrey Marks. She says under the new system, public sector employees may begin work as early as 6:30 a.m. or as late as 10:30 a.m., while traditional working hours remain available.
So we are now going into the full implementation of flexible works arrangements, starting on a phase basis on February 2nd, 2026. This phase will commence with staggered working hours. I wish to highlight that traditional working hours, 8:30 to 5 p.m. in the public sector, will remain available to all employees. The implementation of staggered working hours is not mandatory. However, it is strongly encouraged, and given the nature of employees' duties, staggered working hours may not be available to all categories of staff, but where there is flexibility, the government entities are encouraged to implement flexible working arrangements.
The minister says the shift won't stop at the public sector, announcing plans to engage the private sector on the broader adoption of flexible work arrangements.
The private sector also has a significant role to play in Jamaica's productivity, and many have already started with the flexible work program. And in the coming weeks, I'll be reaching out to the private sector through the PSOJ to discuss total adoption across the private sector.
That was Minister of Efficiency, Innovation and Digital Transformation, Ambassador Audrey Marks. Jamaica's labor market is set for a boost following Senate approval of amendments to the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act, expanding access to criminal record expungement for rehabilitated individuals. The changes widen eligibility from 5 to 10 years after completion of a sentence and introduce automatic expungement for certain non-custodial convictions completed before January 1, 2005. Education Minister Senator Dana Morris-Dixon says the reform removes the long-standing barriers that have locked thousands of Jamaicans out of formal employment, overseas work, and business opportunities.
The expungement of one's criminal record affords the rehabilitated person who has paid their debt to society a second chance, so as to pursue certain opportunities, such as employment opportunities and even residing overseas. The second chance concept is, in theory, the main objective of this legislation. However, it has not been fully operationalized.
The minister warns that delays and denials in the expungement system have carried real economic consequences for rehabilitated Jamaicans.
Many applicants who have indeed paid their debt to society, who have benefited from reform, rehabilitation, and training, have still been denied the expungement of their criminal records. And I know many of us know individuals like that. These unsuccessful applicants have indicated that as a result, their standard of living has been negatively affected, which is an emotional and financial impediment.
That was Education Minister Senator Dana Morris-Dixon speaking during a Senate sitting on Friday. Jamaica's government is warning that weak data protection is now fueling large-scale fraud and financial losses. Speaking at the International Data Privacy Conference 2026, Minister without Portfolio for Science and Technology Andrew Wheatley revealed that a recent fraud investigation uncovered more than $600 million taken from local financial institutions using fraudulently obtained but genuine documents.
Law enforcement official announced arrest in what they are calling one of the most elaborate and brazen fraud schemes Jamaica has seen to date. The individuals have been charged with this multi-million-dollar fraud investigation, and it has been said or claimed by the law enforcement officials that some $600 million were taken from a number of financial institutions across the island. And according to the major organized crime and anti-corruption agency, these suspects allegedly assumed the identities of multiple individuals with varying occupations using fraudulently obtained genuine documents.
Wheatley says every one of these cases points to a failure of data protection.
And these fraudulent identification bypass security protocols and identity confirmation measures at these financial institutions. The sophistication involved in manipulating identities to defeat institutional safeguards is quite alarming. In fact, the scale is unprecedented. It is just that in this particular instance that law enforcement was able to catch up on these persons. But here's the critical point, ladies and gentlemen. Behind every one of these incidents is a failure of data protection. I'll say it again. Behind every one of these incidents is a failure of data protection.
Minister without portfolio for Science and Technology, Andrew Wheatley. Moving now to financial news. Edufoca Limited has recorded a sharp turnaround in operating performance, swinging to a $12.7 million operating profit for the 9 months to September 2025 after posting a $24.2 million Jamaican dollar loss a year earlier, even as revenue fell by 33%. The company's latest management discussion and analysis shows revenue declined to Jamaican $55.7 million, down from $83 million in the same period last year. Management says the drop was deliberate as Edufocal pivots away from large, volatile project contracts towards recurring subscription-based income streams. Despite the top-line contraction, adjusted EBITDA swung to a positive $14 million when compared to a $13.9 million loss in 2024, a $28 million improvement in core operating performance. The improvement was driven largely by aggressive cost restructuring. Administrative expenses were slashed by 73%, falling from $91.4 million to $24.2 million as the company downsized operations and streamlined its organizational structure. In the meantime, Edufocal's net loss narrowed sharply to $10.4 million, an 81% improvement year-on-year, underscoring what management describes as a fundamental shift in the company's risk profile and operating discipline. We move to the latest updates from the JSE equities. In Monday's trading session, the JSE market activity resulted in the trading of 118 stocks, of which 37 advanced, 64 declined, and 17 traded firm. Today's winners are Iron Rock Insurance Company, Productive Business Solution USD Ordinary Shares, Epley Limited 7.75%, Preference Shares, and 138 Student Living Jamaica Variable Preference. While leading the losers are MFS Capital Partners, Mayberry Jamaican Equities, G West Corporation Ordinary Shares, and Cygnus Credit Investments USD Ordinary Shares. The main index declined by 691.98 points to close at 345,745.18 points. The junior market index declined by 56.39 points to close at 3,333.91 points.
And it's time for Market Education Feature, brought to you by Carrie Chris, Regional Ratings, Global Standard.
In today's Market Education Feature, we're defining the term non-renewable resources. Non-renewable resources are natural materials taken from the earth that exist in limited supply and cannot be replenished within a human time frame. Unlike renewable resources, they are used far faster than they can be replaced. Common examples include coal, oil, natural gas, and other fossil fuels. These resources are widely processed into commercial products. For example, crude oil is refined into gasoline and petrochemicals used to produce plastics and solvents. Some groundwater sources are also considered non-renewable when aquifers cannot recharge quickly enough.
The Market Education Feature was brought to you by Carrie Chris, Regional Ratings, Global Standards.
And that's it for the local news segment. Please stay with us. The regional news is up next.
News is brought to you by Darriman Trading, better from the start. Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean flavors and fragrances, tease the senses, and Pulse Investments.
Caribbean dreams, instant turmeric tea. What you put in is what you get out. What you put in is what you get out. Yeah. Build up your body, boost up your brain. Take on the world now. Say bye-bye pain. Caribbean dreams, instant turmeric tea. Be good to you. Caribbean dreams, instant turmeric tea. Distributed by Amalgamated Distributors Limited.
Welcome back. And now for the regional business news. A reduction in the Bahamas crime rate is emerging as a positive economic signal as new police data show a broad decline in violent and property-related offenses. At a press conference on Friday, National Security Minister Wayne Monroe reported a decline in major crimes by 15%, with homicides falling 31% in 2025 when compared to 2024. Lower violent crime is said to reduce disruption costs, improve workforce reliability, and support tourism performance.
Major crime was down 15% over the previous year, and the regional decreases were given across the islands. The crimes against a person decreased by 27%, that homicides decreased by 31% to 83 incidents compared to 120 in 2024. For reference, in the pandemic year, the murder count was 78 when we were all locked down and there was police presence all over the streets. And so the number for last year was just 5 more than that time.
That was the Bahamas National Security Minister, Wayne Monroe. Barbados is positioning agro-processing as a central pillar of its economic transformation, with plans to turn the island into a regional hub for value-added agricultural production. The strategy was outlined by the Barbados Labour Party BLP candidate for St. Philip North, Kay McConney, at the party's manifesto launch at Golden Square last Friday.
It is the intention as part of our reindustrialization to make Barbados a regional agro-processing hub. And what does that mean? It means that right now we grow a lot of agricultural stuff and we either use it or we sell it in just the form that we grow it. Agro-processing now allows us to add value and to process it and develop it into products that will earn us a whole lot more money. Agro-processing is that bridge between farming and industry. And that has to be the way in which we go.
That was BLP candidate for St. Philip North, Kay McConney. In other news, Guyana's 2025 growth story is not one that is defined by speed alone, but by a shift in the structure of the economy. In his 2026 budget presentation, President Dr. Irfan Ali says the country expanded by over 19% for the year under review, sharply outperforming global growth of 3.3% and positioning Guyana among the world's fastest growing economies.
Our country again has demonstrated a robust growth-oriented strategy, growing at 19.3% in 2025, when global growth averages at about 3.3%. Last year, average growth rate in advanced economy was 1.7%, and in developing economy was about 4.4%. So, if you look at Latin America and the Caribbean, the region that we're in, the average economic growth in 2025 was 2.4%. The economic growth of Guyana was not only more than two times more than two times that. It is the second fastest economy.
That was President of Guyana, Dr. Irfan Ali. It's now time for news from the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 21 securities, of which 6 advanced, 9 declined, and 6 traded firm. Today's winners are First Citizens Group Financial Holdings, Massey Holdings, Prestige Holdings, and National Flour Mills, while leading the losers are JMMB Group, Trinidad and Tobago NGL, Grace Kennedy, and One Caribbean Media. Trading activity resulted in the following movements. The All TNT Index advanced by 7.59 points to close at 1,392.08. The Composite Index advanced by 2.12 points to close at 948.72. The Cross-Listed Index declined by 0.54 points to close at 66.29. The SME Index remained at 92.68. And we take a short break, but please do stay with us. The international news segment is up next.
It's feeling so good right now. Feeling so good right now. Yeah, yeah. It's feeling so good right now. Feeling so good right now. Yeah, yeah. It's feeling so good right now. Don't never, ever, ever wanna calm down. No, no, no. Yeah, yeah.
So much book you need for high school?
I'll show you how to make sure you have all the money for my books and even some extra. It's called budgeting, Dad. Making a budget is the most important thing you can do to track your money. It keeps a record of how much you make, how much you spend, where you spend it, and most importantly, how much you can save. Write down all your income, write down all your expenses, see where you can cut down and allot more money to more important things, like saving.
Welcome back. In international news, the United Nations UN is warning that global power is shifting rapidly, proposing a US $3 billion artificial intelligence fund to help less advanced economies keep pace. Speaking at his annual start of the year press conference recently, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says 2026 is already unfolding amid constant surprises and chaos, warning that artificial intelligence sits at the center of a growing global power shift.
I'm also calling for the creation of a global fund for AI capacity development with a target of $3 billion. As we begin this year, we are determined to choose actions that generate concrete and positive reactions as called for in the Pact for the Future.
Guterres framed the AI initiative within a broader warning about outdated global economic structures.
Those systems are out of time. They still reflect the economic and power structures of 80 years ago. But the world is moving on. Every day, the share of global economic activity by the traditional group of developed economies recedes, quietly, gradually, but undeniably. And every day, emerging economies expand in scale, in influence, and in confidence.
That was UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. And from global systems under strain, the US Federal Reserve is now pointing the finger at tariffs. The Federal Reserve says tariffs, not excess consumer demand, are now the primary source of inflationary pressure in the U.S. economy. Speaking after the Federal Open Market Committee's latest meeting, Fed Chair Jerome Powell explained that most of the recent overshoot in inflation is coming from goods prices, which he says have been boosted by the effects of tariffs rather than from strong consumer demand.
Inflation has eased significantly from its highs in mid-2022, but remains somewhat elevated relative to our 2% longer-run goal. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index indicate that total PCE prices rose 2.9% over the 12 months ending in December, and that excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 3.0%. These elevated readings largely reflect inflation in the goods sector, which has been boosted by the effects of tariffs.
That was U.S. Fed Chair Jerome Powell. And while the Fed points to tariffs as a driver of inflation, Washington is now using them as leverage in global trade. The United States is cutting tariffs on Indian goods to 18% after President Donald Trump said India agreed to reduce its dependence on Russian oil. Trump announced the decision after talks with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, saying India would replace Russian crude with supplies from the United States and Venezuela. But the numbers highlight the challenge. India currently imports about 1.5 million barrels of Russian oil per day, accounting for more than 1/3 of its total crude imports, according to global trade data provider Kepler. That is more oil than Venezuela produces and far more than can be quickly replaced. Analysts say Venezuelan crude is technically suitable for India's refineries, but years of underinvestment mean restoring production would require tens of billions of dollars and up to a decade of work. Turning now to global markets, where currencies are finding their footing. The Mexican peso rebounded toward 17.40 per US dollar on Tuesday, snapping 3 consecutive sessions of losses as markets adjusted after last week's sharp US dollar-led sell-off. The earlier decline was triggered by a renewed surge in the greenback following the nomination of Kevin Warsh as the next chair of the Federal Reserve, alongside stronger than expected US economic data. Those developments pushed U.S. Treasury yields higher, increasing the opportunity cost of holding peso positions and prompting an unwind of crowded carry trades that had supported the currency. And that's it for the international segment of the newscast. The news recap is coming up on the other side of the break.
I'm trading stocks to achieve my financial goals.
I'm also trading stocks to achieve my financial goals.
Start a conversation with the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
Check jamstockx.com for information and a list of registered stockbrokers. You can also call the Jamaica Stock Exchange at 876-967-3271 for information on how to begin. I am achieving my financial goals.
I'm achieving my financial goals.
And now to recap our top stories. In the local news, public sector commenced a flexible work arrangement today, February 2. Regionally, major crimes down 15% in the Bahamas, signals reduced business risk. And internationally, UN proposes $3 billion AI fund as global power shifts. Those were the stories making today's CBX Evening News. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Rochelle Moncrief. Thanks for watching CBX, your vision, your business, your source.